All right, I'm back. It's Johnny Jet. This is 39 questions with Rudy Maxa. 39 travel questions with Rudy Maxa. Rudy has no idea what he's in for, but I've been a big fan of Rudy's since I started doing travel, which is around 1995. I used to go to the travel shows, watch Rudy speak, in awe of him. In 2000, he was kind enough to take me to lunch and show me the ropes a little bit. So I'm very.
And you never looked back. You were the early adapter to social media, and the rest of us going, "What's he doing? What is that? What is that thing?" You're way ahead of us, past us all. Do I win a car or something here on this, or what do I get?
Well, you know what? If this thing gets a lot of traffic to the website, by the way, so if you're on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel right below. And if you like this video, like it. If you don't like Rudy, dislike it. But I don't think that's going to happen.
How can you not like Rudy? How can you not like Rudy?
Everyone loves Rudy. Everyone.
Sure, everyone.
Right. Including myself. But we're just going to go through this list. It's 39 travel questions, and it's going to be fast. And we'll see how fast you can do it. So, Rudy.
Yeah.
Give me a short bio. I know you had a show on Nat Geo or PBS.
Well, the first 20 years of my life, I was an investigative reporter and scandal monger in Washington, D.C., 11 years with the Washington Post, 9 years with the city magazine Washingtonian. Then I started writing some travel articles, and I started doing a national show on public radio called The Savvy Traveler that was coast to coast. And even though I didn't ever plan to be a travel journalist at all, it just one thing followed another. And I now have 98 shows on public television. Well, I have produced 98 shows that have been on, and some still are on public television, called Rudy Maxa's World. And yes, I was a contributing editor to National Geographic Traveler magazine for 17 years. And I've, won a few Emmys and Civil Awards and missed the Pulitzer by one vote at the Washington Post. But I mean, who remembers that? I mean, I don't. Written a couple books, I speak a lot. What do you need? Windows, I do them.
You're the man. You really are. You're the man. Right. So where did you grow up?
I grew up all over the place. My father was in the Army. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, but at 3 months old, we moved to Germany. And so he did 2 tours in Germany when I was older and could remember it, as well as when I was just born. Fort Knox, Kentucky, Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, Huntsville, Alabama, Cleveland, Ohio, when I lived with my Czech grandmother, because my dad was stationed in Turkey and there's no housing for wife and kids. But I say I'm from Washington, D.C. because I went to high school, junior high and high school in the Washington area. And right after college at Ohio University, I went to work at the Washington Post and lived in D.C. for about 45 years till I met a woman in your city, L.A., which is where I was trying to move to. And I thought, this is perfect. But she lived in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I now live in St. Paul, Minnesota. But she wanted to move to L.A. too. But, the real estate slump hit. Things didn't work out. And then she met some other guy. And she now lives in Napa. And I'm still in St. Paul going, what the hell am I doing here? Anyway. I travel a lot. It's okay. I travel a lot. It's all right. And I have a lot of great friends here.
Wow. So where did you go to college?
Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, in Appalachia, near the West Virginia border. I have 2 children. One is my daughter who's just turned 45, lives in London and France. And I have 2 granddaughters who are 9 and 11 who live with her and her husband. They're both American, but they're all English, dual citizenship with English, British as well as American. And I have a son who's single, who's 34, lives in San Francisco.
And what'd you study in college?
I studied journalism because not until the 3rd year did I realize I could have just taken that as a minor, because I got involved in the college paper where I learned a whole lot more than I did in classes, with all due respect to my professors. Minored in economics. If I had to do over again, I'd major in economics and minor in journalism. But there you go. My degree's in journalism.
And what's your earliest travel memory? I guess going to Germany when you were 3 months old?
Well, in those days, I certainly don't remember 3 months, no, but, we traveled back and forth for occasionally 3 years. And I think it was I can't believe I can remember back even 3.5 years, when I was 3.5 years old. Maybe it was when we returned to Germany. When I was 9, I don't know. We often traveled by ship,
wow.
Military ship. And my most distinct memory is they didn't refrigerate milk. So I was asked to drink warm milk all the time. That's my most distinct travel memory, is being on a ship, having to drink warm milk, which I hated. But, obviously growing up in a lot of places and having an army, every weekend in Germany, again, when I was in my, young teens, or just before my teens, actually, every weekend we would drive to somewhere else. We'd drive to Amsterdam, we'd drive to Brussels, we'd go to Paris. Every weekend my father would make a car trip. And so I have a lot of memories from that, obviously.
Wow. Any idea how many countries you've been to?
People, no, I added them up once a while ago, a few years ago. I think it was 65 at the time, but I don't know. I've never actually written it down and studied it. Maybe it's maybe 70, maybe now.
Okay. And have you been to all 7 continents?
I have not. I have not been to Antarctica.
Me either.
Yeah.
What's your favorite American city?
Ooh, that's tough. Wow, that is very tough. Probably, I've wanted to live in Los Angeles for a long time, so I have to say Los Angeles, Southern
Boy.
California, because I really grew up when I lived in Washington. I had a girlfriend. We bought a place in New York, so I was a divorced dad. I spent 1 week in DC with my kids, 1 week in New York with my girlfriend at the place we bought on the Upper East Side. So I love New York, and I would live in New York happily if I could afford it. But I've always been East Coast and now Upper Midwest, and I mean upper. So I don't like cold weather. So Southern California has always had a lure to me.
And how about favorite international city?
Oh, is this part of 39 questions?
We're like in it.
Thank God. Okay, well, I'm glad we're ticking some off. I thought this was a preliminary get to know Rudy. I thought it was okay. Favorite international city? Oh my goodness. I guess I'd say, hey, gosh, how do you decide between Paris and London and Bangkok and Hong Kong and all kinds of places? All the above.
All right. Well, you know what? Where do you think the friendliest people in the world are?
I think in Eastern European and Asian cities.
Really?
Particularly in Eastern European ones, yeah.
Well,
I think they're so happy to see Americans. Look, I mean, everybody's friendly in London, everybody's friendly in Paris, but Americans are a dime a dozen, and sometimes they're annoying. But you go to Tbilisi, Georgia, and you're still a little bit of a rarity, and they're so excited, and they want you to come to their home and eat and all this sort of thing. And of course, places like Uzbekistan, where you can't shake someone's hand without them saying, "Come in and have dinner." So
okay,
it's unusual. Places where I think Americans are a little more rare than others.
Right. How about which country has the meanest immigration officers?
Probably Russia.
Okay.
Probably Russia. I don't know if it's because I'm American or they're just cranky because they live in Russia. I don't know.
What place do you have no desire to go to?
It's funny. I'm going to say a very popular place, and I'm sure I would be bowled over if I went there, but it's Machu Picchu, because I've seen so many documentaries on it. I've seen so many people's pictures on it. I've seen so many movies. I've heard so many stories. I feel like I've been there. So if somebody said, "Here's a free trip to Machu Picchu," I think I've been there. I'm not sure, but and I'm sure that's unfair to Machu Picchu. I remember I didn't see the Grand Canyon until I was like in my 50s, because I flew over it so many times going from the East Coast to the West Coast. I feel, I've seen the Grand Canyon. I've seen it.
Yeah, I've never been.
Oh my God.
I've never been either.
It's worth it. I was driving by it once and it said Grand Canyon to the right 30 miles. It wasn't the direction I was going, but I was early. I thought, 30 miles, I'll go see it. What the heck? And I got there and I was like, whoa, I have not seen the Grand Canyon until you see it.
Yeah, I really want to go. Do you have a favorite airline?
Probably any Asian airline.
Okay. Aisle or window?
Always aisle.
Favorite aircraft type?
Probably any wide body.
Okay.
I mean, I just like the psychic space, the mental space.
Have you sat next to any celebrities on planes?
I've sat next to many celebrities, yes.
Anyone worth noticing or worth talking about?
Who
was the coolest? Who was the biggest jerk? Or maybe you just want to do the coolest.
No, I didn't have any jerks. Howard Stern, who I actually knew from his radio shows in the old days. We just happened to be in the seat next to each other.
How was Howard?
I'm sorry?
How was Howard?
He was fine. Cool? I should say something I probably shouldn't say, but I was flying an airline called MGM Grand that you may remember being in LA.
Wow.
They only used to fly LA, New York, and Vegas. And they were very expensive. They had a coach class section, which was like anybody else's first class. And then they had a first class section, which was like anybody else's living room, swivel chairs, tables that came down for dinner, erratic seating. And then they had 2 cubicles in between those sections with 4 seats. And if there was nobody on them, they could lie the seats down. So it was this enormous double bed. They were bringing sheets and comforters and so on. And I couldn't afford to fly MGM Grand. I couldn't afford it. I had 2 kids. I had to go to college. But I did a spokesman gig for them. And they paid me in airline tickets. And I remember flying from the East Coast to LA with a girlfriend, and they turned this bedroom into a bedroom. And I remember after we had gotten very, very cozy, I got up to use the lavatory, and there was Howard Stern sitting there, and I thought, this guy, all he does is talk about sex in the old days, porn queens and all, And I thought, I'm having more fun than Howard Stern is. And I've sat next to, who's the voice of CNN? Three names.
James Earl
Jones. I've sat next to him. I once sat next to the just retired director of the CIA.
Wow. All on MGM Grand.
I'm sorry? Oh, no.
All on MGM Grand?
James Earl Jones was MGM Grand. Howard Stern was, and then that makes a lot of famous people on MGM Grand. But do I have time to go into a story, or we're not?
Go ahead, let's hear it.
So I had just gone to Russia on assignment for an art magazine to cover an opening of a Peter Max exhibit in what was then called Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, and it was a very big deal for Russian-American relations that this was happening. And I was staying on what used to be a barge for oil workers that had been converted into a very nice hotel. And it was winter, it was snowing. And I had never been to Russia or to Leningrad. And so I got there about 2 p.m. to my hotel room. And I left my hotel room, walked around. It was slightly snowing, a couple inches on the ground. It's beautiful. I'm walking around. I come back in my hotel room, and it's like 4 or 5 in the evening, late afternoon. It's getting dark, of course, in Russia. And the bathroom door was slightly closed halfway, which I had not left it that way. And I thought, well, that's a little weird. And then I went over to my suitcase, which I had set horizontally on a suitcase rack, but it had been opened. And gone was a bottle of wine I had brought, a new novel called The Russia House by John le Carré, and my address book that had all kinds of meetings. Friends said, hey, when you're in St. Petersburg, look at my friends and all this. Not gone, $2,000 in $100 bills.
Not gone.
No. And I was like, what the hell? Who? What? But then I just couldn't figure. So I go to the front desk. I said, people have stolen things from my. And they were, yeah, okay. I said, well, should we call? No, we don't really call. No. They didn't want to do anything, and I didn't speak Russian. I couldn't. Next morning, I'm at breakfast, and the general manager of the hotel is there, who did speak English. I explained it to him. He said, oh, yeah. I'm like, what? So I left Russia confused about all that. Had a great time, did my article. And a few days later, I'm flying from Washington, D.C., where I live, to China. And I don't know how I got into business class, but I was. And I was sitting next to the former head of the CIA, whose name I'll think of in a second. And I guess he was talking, I don't know how we got in the subject. I said I made my first visit to Russia, and I told him the story I just told you. He said, oh, well, they were KGB guys. They knew you were journalists. They came and, tossed your room and took, the scotch and your address book to check out of the names and Russia House. They didn't know what that was, but it was about Russia, so they took it. I said, what about the $2,000? And he said, oh, there were 2 of them. 2 guys.
Okay.
And they wouldn't take it because one guy, neither could be sure the other wouldn't rat out the other.
I see.
So that was one of my most interesting seat partners, going to China with him. So.
Wow. I was not expecting that. I thought you were going to say someone was in the bathroom.
No, unfortunately they weren't. They'd already gone through my stuff, taken mine.
Do you have a favorite U.S. airport?
I tend to like smaller ones. Norfolk is very nice, although it's a long walk to get luggage. I used to date a woman in Virginia Beach nearby, so I know that one fairly well.
Sounds like you dated a lot of women.
Well, I was married for 15 years right out of college, and I'm an old guy, so I've been single for, I don't know, 15, 11, 20, I don't know, 35, I don't know, long time, 40 years. So, there you go, almost not quite 40 years. I'm dating someone in Bangkok right now, which is a little tough to see, a little difficult to see. Favorite city? Then like Charlotte. Doesn't Charlotte have a gorgeous airport? Is that the one with all the white rocking chairs and stuff?
Rocking chairs.
Yeah, the white rocking chairs. I like that. But I also
like
international
airport.
Oh, Munich is a favorite. Singapore. Certainly Hong Kong's airport is stunning. The Asian airports are quite nice. I like big airports as much as small ones because I am happy to go to airports. I'm like many of my friends go, I can't travel those airports. I'm fast, and I think you are too. You love being in airports.
I love it.
I like to see what restaurants there, what shops there. I like watching people. I like looking at the board and seeing all these exotic places that I could go to maybe one day or maybe went to. I love airports.
How about airport lounge? You got a favorite one?
The Cathay Pacific Lounge in Hong Kong is quite breathtaking. Some of the European lounges, Lufthansa lounges, are certainly much nicer than our lounges in the United States. I have an Amex Platinum card, so that lets you in
Centurion.
their private, their private lounges, which are, the food is generally better, although they're getting quite crowded.
How about favorite hotel?
Um, well, I certainly, I'm unlike Rick Steves, who I just had on my webcast the other day, by the way, who likes those 3 and 4 star hotels, at least when he's traveling with his tours. I do like luxury in a hotel, particularly in countries like Asia, like India, where a day in India can exhaust anybody. It would exhaust Superman. I mean, the heat, the humidity, the spices, the colors, the sound, the fragrances. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And to be able to get to an Oberoi hotel or, any of the luxury hotels there and just relax is terrific. And do I like a Four Seasons? Yes, I love a Four Seasons. I mean, there's so many luxury hotels that I haven't been to. I mean, the woman I moved to LA to, I proposed to her. We never did get married, but I did propose to her in Florence, overlooking the city at, I think it's Villa San Michele. Or, Villa San Michele, I think it is. Yeah, very nice hotel.
Well, how about you have a favorite island?
Well, Richard Branson's Necker Island, where I went to when I was very young, when I was just starting as a travel writer, and my buddy Peter Greenberg said, "There's a junket down to Richard Branson's Necker Island," and that was quite extraordinary.
That is amazing.
I certainly like a couple of the islands of French Polynesia. I did a lot of the Caribbean because I lived on the East Coast, and Caribbean's fine. I'm not knocked out by all of them, but I haven't been to I haven't been to islands off the coast of India, so and Africa, which I would love to go.
Favorite beach?
It's funny. It's in France. That is where my daughter is now with my 2 granddaughters. She escaped London and drove across the French border 2 hours before the French closed the border.
Wow.
So she's doing her sheltering at home in a peninsula. It's called Cap Ferret, Ferret. Now, this is not Cap Ferrat, which is on the other side of France by Monte Carlo on the French Riviera. This is over on the Atlantic side, the other side of France. It's about a 40-minute drive from the town of Bordeaux. And it's a long, narrow peninsula, originally and still populated by lots of oystermen. So on one side, you have the Atlantic Ocean. The other, you have a bay that goes over to the town of Arcachon that has a lot of hotels. Cap Ferret has very few hotels, very few tourists. A lot of wealthy French people go there, and Americans don't much know about it because you can't really go stay there. So you can come over to Arcachon on a ferry every day. And when you come over on the Atlantic side, are Europe's largest beaches. So extraordinary. They make, the beaches of LA look like, little piles of sand. Wow. They're extraordinary, beautiful, hugely wide. Nobody knows about them. I mean, you can sunbathe nude, nobody will see you because they're so enormous. Wow. They go for miles. So, and the oysters are 85 cents each, and they deliver them right to your door when you call up an oyster shack. They say, "We'll bring them right over," and they've got them shucked and the lemon and everything all there, and 85 cents each. So that's my favorite beach.
Okay, I've been to Ile de Ré, which I think is nearby, but
it has that kind of name. I don't know. It may be.
Yeah, and it's also an oyster town, so.
Probably is.
All right. Do you have a favorite fancy restaurant or favorite hole in the wall restaurant?
Ooh. Well, one of my best friends runs some Japanese restaurants in DC that I've always been in love with. One is called Sushiko, and he also has a omakase restaurant. Not omakase restaurant, izakaya restaurant, which is a lot of small plates made with interesting things. And here in St. Paul, there's actually a bistro. Thank goodness. When it opened, thank goodness it opened. It's called Meritage, like the wine, a Meritage wine. A lot of people call it Meritage, but it's actually an English word, not a French word. And unfailingly good food, bistros. My favorite restaurant chain is one a lot of people may not know it's a chain. I know you do because I've told you about the ownership. It's the Hillstone chain, which owns Houston's and then all kinds of other restaurants with like the Palm Beach Grill, and they own a couple of Banderas in Chicago and in Orange County and in Los Angeles. They own probably 60 or 70 restaurants, all owned by one guy, and they've never paid $1 to get PR or advertising.
Wow.
It's all word of mouth, and they're always crowded. It's mid-priced. 2 people can eat dinner for $60, $70. If you have no wine, even less. But always consistently good food. So it's a middle-of-the-road restaurant, but really good.
Okay.
Chain, I should say. There are 2 of them in New York called Hillstone, by the way.
How about your favorite food?
Fish,
Okay.
Chilean sea bass, oysters, anything fish I normally like. Occasionally, I'm not a pescatarian necessarily. I like a good pork chop or half as I can't eat. I can't eat a whole New York strip anymore, but half of one I'll take now and then, which is good. I go out to dinner with the old guys and we split a New York steak, and it's cheaper and it's just about all we need at this age.
How about favorite fruit?
Well, I'm mangoes, I guess would be my favorite, mangoes and strawberries, but mangoes primarily, yeah.
And what's the craziest thing you've ever eaten?
Oh gosh. Well, I was in Jordan once in the desert with those guys who live in the desert, and they roasted a lamb. And I don't know if they tell this to foreigners just to freak us out because they know it does. They take the eyeball out of the lamb and hand it to you because you're the honorary guest and you have to eat it,
Oh no.
which I did. And it tastes it's a little squishy and slippery, just like you'd imagine an eyeball to be. And again, I don't know if that's really native custom or whether it's just and I don't like sea slugs, those big fat, they look like huge slugs from the bottom of the sea that they serve a lot in China that taste like leather. It takes forever to chew them. Those are the only two things I can think of that I don't like. I like everything.
Okay. How about drink of choice in the air and on the ground?
In the air, I might have a glass of wine if it's a dinner and it's a decent wine, and you're in front of you're actually getting a $30 bottle of wine instead of a $15 bottle of wine. I'm not a big cocktail guy. They all have designer cocktails and spirits, handcrafted and so on with shaped ice like they do in Japan. Now they're doing in America. And, I'll try those because it's interesting now and then. But generally, I collect wine, particularly Burgundy wine. So I guess Burgundy, red Burgundy and white Burgundy would be my choice.
Okay. How about your favorite travel movie?
Well, Up in the Air is always fun for those of us who care about frequent flyer miles, as you and I do, and some of the reprobates we hang around with. But I do like, remember John le Carré's novel was turned again into a, 4 or 5 part, 6-part series on HBO, I think it was a couple of years ago, The Night Manager. Okay. And it was set in Switzerland and you haven't seen The Night Manager?
No.
Oh, Johnny, I'll send you a link. It's quite riveting.
Okay.
It's set in Egypt. It's set in Switzerland. It's set in, I don't know, gorgeous islands. I'm watching this really trashy series on, not the Smithsonian Channel, the Robert Redford's one? What's his resort called?
Sundance? No.
The Sundance Channel. The Sundance Channel. It's called Riviera, and it's set entirely in the French Riviera. It's got in the second season. I think that only 2 seasons are out, and it's sex, intrigue, murder, money, everything you would expect on the French Riviera. But the aerial shots and the scenery, and it is actually shot there because I know that I used to be a backgammon player in the French Riviera for a long time, and those shots are right there. And so it's very great fun for me to watch because of the scenery.
Gotcha. So that actually, my next question, what was your favorite travel show? I think we'll count that as it. What do you think?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's not really a travel show. That's that's a cheesy drama show. But my favorite, I certainly liked Andrew Zimmern's Bizarre Foods, although he went on a lot of seasons, and God bless Andrew, he's a close friend of mine, but I didn't stick with him all the way to the end. But that was, it was on the Travel Channel, even though it was a food show.
Right.
But he did a lot of traveling.
How about a favorite travel book?
Wow, that is very difficult because I have a lot of, I do this weekend radio show, and I've started doing webcasts on Thursdays as well. And I have a lot of authors on, like Paul Theroux. I love Paul Theroux. I like Simon Winchester's book when he writes about the Mediterranean or the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific. Pacific really wasn't a travel book. It was a book about things around the Pacific. I like Simon Winchester's writing. I like Paul Theroux's writing. Those are modern day travel writers, authors I respect, and I wish I could write as well as they do.
How about favorite travel app?
Well, because I'm in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Delta owns this place. They own the airport here. The most often used app I use is Delta to see if I got upgraded or to make reservations. Certainly Google Flights I look at a lot to check out stuff, and Google Maps, and obviously, Waze for driving and so on.
Yep. How about what do you always seem to forget?
Oh man, I have a dermatologist, this gorgeous woman named Dr. Dick, who keeps telling me to wear a hat in the sun. I can't get any sun on, so I'll go on. I'll get in the plane to go. Unfortunately, there's no shortage of baseball caps in the world, so as you are living proof of. So I often leave the house without a cap and get there and go, do I have to buy another baseball cap? Yeah. So I'll always forget one thing. My dread is always that I'll forget an electrical connection because I'll do the radio show from wherever I am, but I have to plug a certain kind of plug into a box and into my laptop. And I always panic when I start opening up my kit going, I'm sure I lost that one connection I won't be able to get, at short notice here. I'll always forget something.
Gotcha. Worst travel moment. We're down to like 3 more questions.
Okay. Well, the worst travel moment, and you know this story, I think I was shooting one of my public television shows in Uzbekistan, and we were doing sort of a Silk Road show, and we were in a Silk Road town called Khiva, spelled Khiva, and in a very dry desert-like environment. And I only saw one camel, which was in town under a tree with a guy holding a rope, and he was charging people like mom and dads, about 50 cents or something to put their child on the camel, named Catherine, by the way, take a picture of the child, and that was that. And my producer goes up, and with our translator, we go up to him in the morning, and my producer says, we're doing this TV show, and we'd love to put Mr. Maxa, or as she used to call me, the meat puppet, on this camel tonight when the light is nice, and we're going to have him in a very thick velvet Uzbek robe, like from here down to my ankles. It was about 110 degrees there, by the way. And a big bearskin cap, and he's carrying a silk rug and some spices, and he looks at the camera while being on this camel as camel's walking, and he says, I'm laden with silk and spices here in Uzbekistan. I hate to leave, but I'll see you next week or whatever. And the guy goes, not good idea, not good idea. Well, we should have thought, if the guy who owns Catherine says it's not a good idea, it's probably not a good idea. But my producer says, well, how about $50, which is probably what he makes in a month if he's lucky. And he goes, okay, idea's getting better. Okay, so we go back at 8 at night, the sun's setting, the light's pretty, we go down to this cobblestone street, and he brings out a ladder, and I get on the camel. There is no saddle, there's no rope, there's nothing to hold on to, nothing, except a hump in front of me, nothing girding me in or anything. And so the camel owner has some bread, and he walks leading the camel down the street toward the camera, feeding it bread. Now in the shot, you can't see him leading the camel with the bread. You see the head of the camel, and you see me riding up there in my velvet robe, perspiration. And we do one take, I deliver the line, it's fine, but no producer's happy with one line, we have to do it again. So a ladder comes, I get off the camel, Catherine and I walk back to the starting point, I get on the thing, I get on the camel again, and I feel an undulating between my legs like I was up in the air long enough to look down at the cobblestone street and think, not gonna be pretty. I was unconscious, my crew actually thought I was dead. And I wound up with a broken right clavicle and a lot of stitches in my head because blood was everywhere.
Oh my
God. We used if you see the Uzbekistan show, which you can get on Amazon Prime, I think, or, you'll see that closing shot with me looking good, saying, here I am laden with silk and spice. But
so what happened? You fell, or
I was hurled into the air, and I went high enough up there, just went down to the ground. I couldn't brace myself.
Oh my God! I thought you were going to say that. I thought you were going to tell me that it was 50 cents for the mom and pops, and then when you got on, it was 50 cents. But for him to get down, they were going to charge you like $100, which they do in a lot of places.
No, but that guy disappeared with Catherine fast. By the time I woke up from unconscious, he was nowhere to be seen.
Wow.
It was pretty. And we have the camera was running, so we have a clip of it. We thought, we'll post this on YouTube because people love to see people getting their crotches caught on fences, climb, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I sent it to a friend of mine, an actor in LA, who's very sarcastic and is always giving me crap about one thing. And he said, I want to see that. I want to see it. So I sent him the clip, which we hadn't posted yet. And he called me and said, that wasn't quite as funny as I hoped it would be. And we did decide it actually looked like I was dead and it wouldn't be all that funny. So we never did post it. But we have it in our archives.
It's not too late.
But, it's a good look. Nobody remembers when you have a good time, Johnny, when you go somewhere. I went to French Polynesia. The weather was perfect every day. Oh my gosh, I went snorkeling and scuba diving with the shark. It was fun. People go, I've always wanted to go there. You say, I was shooting in Uzbekistan, and I broke my right clavicle when I got thrown off this camel. Then they're like, yeah, what? You got a story. Mine is a very dangerous business, Johnny.
That's true. So, what is your most embarrassing travel moment?
Well, the time I was most self-conscious was we were shooting in Shanghai, and we're downtown Shanghai, and there was this wide, very modern pedestrian area with, very nice shops on both sides. You see them in many cities where you could just walk down and you go and shop in department stores and restaurants, and very modern, and it was jammed with people. So my producer wanted me, the same one who put me on the damn camel, wanted me to deliver a line, a rather long line, a couple lines, walking toward the camera. But there were just so many people, we couldn't do it. There's so many people. So one of our assistants got out and sort of parted the sea of people.
Oh
Well,
my
they saw
God.
the TV camera on the tripod and they got all excited. So they parted happily, but they didn't keep moving. They just stopped. So I had about 200 people on either side, which you can't see on camera, of course. And I'm walking down, and even if they didn't speak English, they knew when I blew a line because I get halfway, they go, "Ah, jeez," and I have to walk back and do it again. And they were wildly amused every time I blew a line. I probably had to do it 10 times.
Wow.
They were rooting for me to blow that line every time. Then they start clapping and start laughing, and I was totally embarrassed. And when I was finally finished, I got a big round of applause. So
That's awesome. I can feel that. I hate that. Do you have a dream destination?
I would like to go to Mauritius. Yeah.
Okay.
There are places, a lot of places I'd like to spend more time in, and I'm sure you feel the same way. But yeah, I would say I'd like to go to Mauritius. Uh, I've never been to Brazil, which is weird. I don't know how I've avoided Brazil. I've just never been. I would like to go to the beaches of Brazil,
Well,
and those two would be top of my list. Yeah.
that's surprising. So before we get to your best travel tip, tell people how they can find you. What's your social handles, website?
If you go to maxa.tv, you'll see all my shows there. You can buy some DVDs if you want. RudyMaxa.com will take you to the weekend radio show I do with my co-hosts Robert and Mary Carey. But pretty soon on Maxa TV we'll have a link to my webcast I do every Thursday afternoon. This coming week will be my 5th one, and I generally do 2 guests for about 25 minutes each, and I try to get very interesting people who can sustain it. I like doing the weekend radio show, but it's commercial radio, and there's so many breaks and commercials that a long interview literally is 8 minutes, and most of them are 5 to 6. And sometimes you get a good guy like Paul Theroux on, or Andrew Zimmern, or you for that matter, because you're going to be on.
I've been on.
That's right. You were on the first one, weren't you?
Second one.
Second one. Sorry. I can't remember. I got the weekend people with 10 guests, and then I can't remember. And I see you so often. I think you're on all the time. You have been on, and you'll be on again. But I like having that half hour to talk. It's so, as a journalist, I get a lot of questions. Right. To you, maybe not 39, but a lot. And I like having that freedom of having half hour. So if you're interested in Andrew Zimmern or Johnny, if you go to YouTube and just type in Rudy Maxa, you'll see those 1 hour things that we did live that are now parked on YouTube. It's a thing I call I Was Thinking. So,
well, subscribe to Rudy's channel. Also, please subscribe to mine. The link is right below. Also, like this video because it helps in the algorithms. And the final question to Rudy Maxa: what is your best travel tip?
I think it's that how to avoid the line at the Eiffel Tower. Not that there's one there now, but there will be again. Which is just book a table for lunch or dinner at Jules Verne. It's a Michelin-starred restaurant, so it's expensive, but it's up on the first level. It's got a beautiful view. You're not at the top, but it's beautiful. But there's a private entrance with a private elevator that gets you by that huge long line, and it's free right up to the restaurant. And you can have your lunch or dinner, or before your lunch or dinner, you can continue on up without waiting in line and having to pay an entrance fee.
That's a great tip.
And it's a good meal.
I never knew that.
I've
been up there, but I didn't eat at the restaurant or go to the restaurant.
It's worth taking. I know who you love, and I know she'd like it.
Well, Rudy, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. And
Johnny, thank you for asking me aboard. Thank you.
I look forward to when this quarantine's over, where we can hang out. And
I know we will.
Next time.
Thanks so much, very much for having me. Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you.